call this meeting of the Madison School Board to order. Item 1.1, call for a public hearing. Do I have a motion to call for a public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
So a motion by Ms. Kazi, a second by Ms. Gresham. Please vote.
No, just procedural. I don't think you need to vote.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I'm
But
sorry.
now it's just the roll call.
Oh, all right.
That's why it's not coming up.
So, Dr. Baca, will you introduce this item, item 1.3, public hearing on the district budget revision 2?
Sure. And Mr. President, before I do that, I'll go ahead and take the roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Dr. Osborne,
Here.
Mr. Holcomb,
Here.
Ms. Gresham,
Here.
Ms. Kazi,
Here.
and Ms. Spear.
Here.
All are present. And now I'll introduce our item for a public hearing. Our Deputy Superintendent, Ms. Lori Garvey, will present the 21-22 budget revision number 2. Ms. Garvey?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Baca, and executive team. As we approach May 15th, which is our final opportunity as a district to revise our budget to reflect any increase in capacity, I bring forward this budget today. The total budget is increasing from the revised number 1, which we did back in December, and it is increasing a total of $481,832. Our maintenance and operations budget at that time was based on the ADM, that number that we had from the state. We were required to revise it then, and it reflected a decrease of 120. Since that, and because it was a December revision, it was based on numbers that they had gathered through November, so really through the first quarter of school. Since then, our ADM has picked up and we've recovered part of that, and that's now what we are recovering. So we have recovered 110 in ADM, which is a net decrease for the whole year of 10, which was very moving in the right direction. So in addition to that, because any fluctuations in the budget do increase the override amount, the override actually, since our projection at the beginning of the year did go down 9,000, but that's due to that decrease of 10 students in ADM. And then the Prop 123, the additional funding, a minor adjustment at $654 decrease, and that's your amount is based on the relative proportion of students that you have compared to the statewide number of students. So that number gets set as we get closer to the end of the year, after the 100th day. Those were the only, that was the only overall change in the budget. Our capital and none of our other funds changed. So before you today, I present one change of an increase of $481,832.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey. Are there any questions from the board?
I assume there's no comment, public comment, or for the public hearing.
No.
All right. Questions, comments? All right, if none, I will adjourn this public hearing. All right, now on to the regular meeting. Will Ms. Spear join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of course.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, I will move. And
Ms.
Mr.
Spear
Holcomb.
and Mr. Holcomb with the second. Please vote. You guys are like in a round of Jeopardy. The agenda has been adopted. Is there a need for an executive session? Seeing none. On to item 4.1, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Baca,
Thank you, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team. First of all, congratulations to all of our award recipients, our students, our staff, community members from earlier today. We really appreciate their service and their commitment to Madison. As a reminder, governing board, we have our PTO luncheon on Monday at 11 a.m. I know that Ms. Humphrey has sent out that calendar invite, so that's just a reminder. Dr. Guerin will be facilitating that meeting. As you know, we always have donations, and we always thank and recognize our donors for committing themselves to helping our schools. A special thank you goes to Virginia G. Piper Trust, who awarded Madison Camel Year three-year $6,900 grant, so we appreciate that. Enrollment for next school year is looking very positive. At this time, we have just over 287 additional students compared to where we are today. This does not include any new in-district students who have yet to enroll. So we have 748 new open enrolled students confirmed to attend a Madison school, with an additional 140 that we're waiting for their response. Depending on those 140 responses will determine how many of the 223 students that are currently on the wait list that we can enroll. So we're looking very good going into next school year. And then finally, the Arizona Department of Economic Security announced that Madison School District will be receiving an additional $15,500 per month per site to help with the recruitment and retention of employees. So if all schools remain licensed, that's an additional $1.3 million for community education next school year. And I want to thank Dr. Osborne for initiating a conversation with our legislative body and the governor's office along with DES, and I'll let him take it from here in terms of, this concludes my report, but just in terms of explaining a little bit of where we're going.
I will start with the report. So following the last meeting where we were struggling with the DES issue, I called the governor's office and said, hey, we have this issue. Christina Corriere, who's up in the governor's office, who does a lot of work with me, referred me down and with some guidance to the Department of Health Services. And there's two things that we're working on. One is we're working on legislation that may pass this year that will allow school districts who have after-school programs and want to stay licensed to exceed the DES requirements, so we can go up to as high as 35 people per 10. And they want to initiate a longer-term discussion for next session about changing the statute and making it more flexible. So that's some immediate relief. While that was occurring, the governor's office had an idea of, well, why don't, in DES, if you're considered a high-quality program, which means you have to get a third-party accreditation, and it's fairly laborious, as I understand. You get extra funding from DES. So originally, they approached DES to deem all school district programs as high quality, which would trigger all the funding requirements. In reaching out to DES, they said, we have this pilot program, only a couple districts have taken. Would you like Madison to go through this? It basically allows a streamlined process through DES to get high quality accreditation, and with that comes more money. And so we're in that process, and it sounds like it's going well. So I will be working on legislation. I've found a Senator Pace bill, and Representative Kaiser is going to run an amendment, hopefully, to do this, and we'll try to get it through the legislature. It's always nice when a lot of the legislative staff are on wait lists for after-school programs. They tend to want to facilitate those. So as I get a little more details, it would be nice if individual board members would kind of reach out to members and say, hey, this is important. So that's what we're working on. I'm not sure it's going to make it all the way through, but I got some downtime while the legislature's doing the budget, so I get into mischief. So that's what I have to report. All right, Mr. Holcomb, you're up next.
I don't have anything quite as exciting as all that, but I did want to report on two things. One, I got the opportunity to go to the Madison Park Steam Night, which is a phenomenal event. It was literally wall-to-wall community members and students and doing their band. The art and they got to show off all their projects, not only the science projects, but the art projects. Madison Highland Prep was there as well, working with the kids. It was phenomenal, and I got a chance to talk to the art teacher at Park, who's interested in getting hats and steampunking a bunch of hats with the kids. But it was just a phenomenal evening, and it was so good to see the community really back. The second thing is I also got the opportunity to go to the mariachi group at the Madison. They were speaking, my Spanish is muy mal, and they were speaking Spanish very quickly and much faster than I could even try to translate the little I know. But the music was phenomenal. And I talked to the people at the Madison. The master program that they put on was standing room only. They had kids everywhere. They loved it. The musicianship was great, so that was a phenomenal event, not only just for the adults, but for the kids as well. And it was great to see the Madison, again, standing room only for an event like that. Thank you, that's all I have.
Right, Ms. Gresham.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Osborne, for your work, all your work on that. I had the pleasure of visiting a few school sites last week, so I got to see all the awesome things that are going on and chat with the principals. So Rose Lane has baby chicks in their classrooms, and Simon says their amazing garden. It's gorgeous. So that was really nice, and I have a couple more coming up this week. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne, for your work. Being able to call the governor's office and having the contacts there and working through what can oftentimes be such a laborious process, and it's a boon to Madison. So thank you so much, and please do give us our marching orders in terms of who to contact and when that becomes appropriate. I wanted to congratulate all of our winners this evening, and also all of the students that are completing their year-end projects. It is trifold season, and it is at every single one of our campuses. There are students completing their end-of-year projects, and it is a lot of work, and in some cases it's a fair amount of pressure. I have had the benefit of seeing some of our students in their IB projects, finishing those up, and I always learn something. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of our students, their families, and our teachers.
Thank you. Ms. Kazi.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Baca this week. I've been bothering him a lot. He's always willing to problem solve for our students and our families, and his prompt response is just, you will be very much missed. I mean, I have to say. I also want to thank Barb Marshall. It was so great when Common Sense Media, when I met with them, and they indicated they wanted to meet with Madison, to only learn afterwards that we'd already been using their materials, and we're always, a step ahead of everybody else, which is always a lovely surprise. So thank you for getting back to them and also showing them that we've got it going on. So that was lovely. And then I had the opportunity to work, as Sarah has been doing, with one of the exhibition groups at SIMUS today. And they have a week to go. And obviously, as all projects, at the last minute, the activity is a flurry. But just watching the students, really kind of connect the dots in real time. Even though, they're all a little squirrely, it's May. I think it's just so important to get back in the classroom and see those ages and so what's happening, what the teachers are doing. Miss Simon was in the classroom, who we awarded. She'll be retiring this year, so it was a really special day to work with those kids. Thanks.
Excellent. All righty. Now on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Holcomb, seconded by Ms. Kazi. Please vote. The motion passes. Now on to item 7.1. Dr. Baca, will you introduce this item?
I'll be happy to, and for the record, we did not have any calls to the public, so that's why we didn't go to that agenda item. Ms. Garvey, our Deputy Superintendent, will be informing you of our District Additional Assistance Override that is set to expire on June 30th, 2024. It's information that then you will consider and make a decision on at the next governing board meeting, so it's for information only. Ms. Garvey?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Bach, and executive team. Just a little bit of background on our district additional assistance and why we would go out for a district additional assistance override. On this first slide here, it shows that our budget, and this is the funding that we get per student from the state, is $450.76. It has been this amount for over 30 years, just so that we know when we're talking about what that can buy versus what it bought 30 years ago. So our budget here in Madison is 2.3, almost 2.4 million. We are by statute allowed to transfer part of that to maintenance and operations, which we have done according to our priorities. So we've transferred almost 1.7, leaving our district additional assistance budget at 698,000. And district additional assistance is typically for capital items, both short-term and long-term. And when I say short-term, capital items, it's more like instructional aids, things that get consumed in the classroom within the year, along with the adoption. So currently, we do have a capital override in place, a DAA override, and it is for $3.1 million. We are limited to the lesser of, well, the way that we have it currently written from the last time that the voters approved it was the lesser of 4.6 million or 10% of the revenue control limit. And the revenue control limit is actually the total amount that we get from the state per student for M&O purposes. Currently, we are using those funds for technology, curricular resources, copiers, furniture and equipment, and preventative maintenance. And to give you a little perspective on that, when we talked about the math adoption, that has come in at over $2 million. So just one adoption really can absorb almost all of this capital money. Okay, and as Dr. Baca said, it is set to expire on June 30th, 2024. We do bring it for you for consideration because if we go out this year for an election and it does not pass, that gives you one additional year to try to get it passed before you have to actually eliminate it. There is no phase down or phase out for this override as there is with the M&O. So once June 24th is if there's no continuation, it's over. Okay. So again, it's limited to 10% of the revenue control limit. Currently estimated for 23-24, so not next year, but the year it would actually go into effect, is about 3.3 million. And it's hard to know exactly where that's going because we never know exactly what our funding is going to be or what your ADM looks like or any additional funding that we may receive. But just being conservative, the 2% inflation built in for the next couple years, we are at 3.3 million. If we look at year 7 with just inflation and no anything additional put in by the legislature, it could go to 4.2 million. And we do project that 4% annual increase in the revenue control limit. So our ballot the last time was 4.6 because before the limit was imposed by the legislature for the override, Madison was levying 4.6 a year. So we would like to put what we think it could possibly grow to by year 7 so that we can keep up with the inflation that comes along with it. So the ballot question currently, and we would recommend, is that it again is the lesser of 10% or 4.6 million to cover that time span of 7 years. When we look at the tax implications and what impact this does have, again, this would be a continuation of tax. It would not be a new tax. The average assessed value of a home within Madison for this next year coming up is $319,429. The tax rate projected on this amount for a home of that value would be $83.50 a year. And the tax rate would be just a little over $26 per $100 of assessed valuation. So you can see here our capital override tax rate has been decreasing, and the projection is that it will decrease again by the time that for next year, and then by the time that the override would be passed. And that is, if the governing board does decide to go forward, they must also submit a pro statement that would be published within the pamphlet. The governing board has to call for an election by the middle of June, so it would be our next board meeting so that we could meet with the county and get the process started. Are there any questions?
Ms. Kazi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can you remind me, the legislature made some changes to capital overrides or district additional assistance about 3 to 4 years ago. Was impacting our tax rate, or is that the valuations? Can you remind me again that change that was made and how it impacted the amount of revenue is available to us through this tax?
Yes, so prior to the legislature making the changes, which actually occurred prior to November of 2016, when we had our election, it was unlimited before. There wasn't a cap on the amount that a district could levy as long as the governing board approved it. And of course, then you had, voter approval. So Madison was levying 4.6 million. So our tax rate back then was definitely higher than it is now. Everything in this chart that's reflected has been the tax rate since it's been lower. So none of this was a result of, we had to cut the amount, so now it does go lower. This is strictly as we watch our assessed value increase, and the amount is staying a little bit more static, that the tax rate is decreasing over time.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Holcomb?
Yeah, two just quick questions. Are you confident that I understand the 4.6 million has a historical basis, but looking at the projection that you have, which is only 4% increase, and if there was something hopeful, miraculous happen that we were starting to get more increase or a change in that revenue control limit, is the 4.6 enough? Because the limiting factor right now is really the 10%. So I want to make sure when we go out and ask, and I don't want to over ask, but I want to make sure that we're comfortable that we really have enough margin there. Because even from the conservative, there's only a margin of $400,000. So is there I just want to make sure, and I trust you, Lori, you've been doing this a long time on that too, but I want to make sure we're clear on that, because I'd love to be able to see it go up to 5 million if it was possible.
Yes, Board Member Holcomb, members of the board, Dr. Bach, and executive team. We could go up higher. Since we started this override, we started at approximately 2.9 million, and now we're to 3.1 million. Now, granted, that is over the course of 5 years, so it is possible that we would exceed the 4.6, but I do feel pretty comfortable setting that as the limit. And then if something substantial would happen, you could always go back out. But if you go back out every 5 years or 6 years, I think that we would be covered by that, because that would be a substantial increase in our budget.
So I guess I say if something more drastic would happen, our fail-safe is we can go out and seek to increase it. That's our, okay, that answers that part. And just Dr. Osborne, this may be going to your words too, how would, if there was some relief given on the revenue limitation, how would that impact the override? Because it's 10% of the revenue override, or the revenue control limit. If that were fixed, because right now it is broken, and hopefully there'd be some move towards fixing that, are we limiting ourselves in that way as well? Or what impact would that have on this override?
I would imagine that it would be like the last one was, which it did not impact it until you were subject to the new law, which is when you had your election. So the one that we had prior remained in effect until the voters approved the next one, at which case then it went to this greater or lesser of the amount.
So, Mr. Holcomb, to your comment, I think if there's any adjustments to the RCL, the legislature is going to limit, they have a very deep concern about local property tax. My bet would be we could get relief there, but we're not going to get help on the bonds and over. That would be my general sense. And I think my other thought to going more than 4.6, I just think we need to balance with the taxpayers' willingness, and remember, in the hyperinflation, we've never gone out for a bond and override when families are really stressed about including their tax rate, and especially when you see what assessed values are doing. And I know it all kind of adjusts out, but I think we need to be mindful of that. We've always passed these at a 60% clip, but never when you've seen 7-9% inflation. I just don't know how the voters are going to react. So, Ms. Gresham.
Yeah, I had the same concern about if, 4.6 was enough. And we also don't want to go out too often, as Dr. Rossborn was saying. But I had another question. Did we have a financial advisory committee this time, or are we going to? Or is that just?
Yes, Board Member
we did that
Gresham,
for bond,
members
the
of
bond.
executive team. No, we did not have an financial advisory board on this override.
And if I may add to that, usually we have the Citizens Financial Advisor Committee, especially for bonds, because of the projects and what we would prioritize. Since this is a continuation of what we have in existence, it's not adding anything different, it's continuing what we already have.
Got it. Thank you.
So, Ms. Spear, did you have a comment or question?
I was going to comment, share basically what Dr. Baca had shared.
I do think it makes some sense for, and I know this is not necessarily in the purview of the Budget Advisory Committee, but I do think I would appreciate if there was some type of briefing email, especially at least to the public members, so that we can, this is part of the budget process, and when you go out to the taxpayers, I think it is respectful of the process. Not that we need an approval, but I think some consulting would be appropriate.
And Dr. Osborne, one more thing to consider on that note. Part of the reason of going out in November is we are already going to have a board election, which the taxpayers would have to pay for. And rather than having another election in an off year and having them have to pay for that election, might as well try to save our taxpayers money by going out when we have a governing board election.
Ms. Spear.
One of the other things that I would appreciate, and I know that my neighbors who happen to be a little bit older and have kids that are out of the system, they're always a little curious as to what these things pay for. And again, it falls down to communications, and if we're able to provide them with the context, which is that this has not changed in 30 years and that the tax rate is going down as assessed values are going up, but that it hasn't changed in 30 years. I think that that really does speak volumes as to, what this is, and then also, obviously, the technology and the curricular resources and all of those things. It's such a mystery to a lot of our taxpayers what this all is. And the political tenor being what it currently is with regards to public education, I think the onus is on us to make sure that we explain ourselves.
To Ms. Spear's point, I think it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe post on the website
Yes.
core highlights of things that we, in a factual basis, the adoptions, major expenditures on, just some of the bullet points to say this is what it pays for. Because I think people don't have any idea that a textbook adoption costs over $2 million. So,
And to all of those points, once you consider and if you approve going out for an election, we will start to do all of that. But we can't do anything until the next board meeting if you so desire to go out for that election.
okay. And I think at that point we'll have some guidance, I think, to staff on appropriate communication within our window. Ms. Kazi.
I just wanted to add, there just continues to be, and I experience this all the time, a lot of confusion about district additional assistance, which has always been known as soft capital until relatively recently, and then capital and what it pays for and why it can't be used for teacher salaries. So I think there is a great deal of value as we have these communications to once again remind voters of the differences. But what does soft capital or district additional assistance pay for? What does capital or bonds pay for? And then what does our M&O? And why we cannot take them out of different buckets. It is a continuous process that we have to it's not a one and done or a 2,000 times it's done. It's a continual education process because people that I thought understood this, I still have conversations with them about it. And so it's an opportunity to once again educate.
I'm going into my 8th year on the board, and I still get confused from time to time. Other questions, thoughts, comments? Dr. Baca, we do have this scheduled as an action item for the next board meeting?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay.
Question related to that is scheduled then too, because we also then need to adopt that formal statement. So after we call the election, because that becomes part of the pamphlet. So that would happen July, August for because this would be this would be a November election, not an August election, not a primary.
Right. Board Member Holcomb, members of the board, Dr. Bach, and executive team, we need it before July, so it would be at the June 14th meeting, because they insert it in the pamphlet, and everything is due sometime in July to early August.
If you call for the election next board meeting, the meeting after that, you will adopt a pro statement.
Okay.
Ms. Beard.
I just wanted to, for anyone who's watching, one of the very simplistic ways that I've always been able to explain it, especially when I, previous to being on the board, ran campaigns, was bonds was with the 3 Bs: books, bricks, and buses. Overrides, operations. And that, for whatever reason, which is very crass, I realize, my apologies to Deputy Superintendent, to break it down to something that's simplistic and incomplete, but for whatever reason, that resonates with the individuals who really don't have the bandwidth to do a deep dive into school finance.
I would throw in a T there too for technology, but it's not as,
But just operations.
it's not as smooth.
Yeah, we lump that in with books. Like I said, crass.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments on item 7.1?
No.
Okay. On to item 8.1, board policy second read. Dr. Baca, is there any changes since the first read? And
Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team, there are no changes to the first read that you considered on April 26th. This is bringing it for action so that we revert to pre-COVID policies and governing board policy GCCA.
so I assume we need a motion on this item?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve policy revision to governing board policy GCCA, professional support staff accrued leave as presented.
A motion by Ms. Cosby. Do I have a
Second.
second? Second by Ms. Gresham. Please vote. The motion has been approved. On to item 9.1, fiscal year 21-22 district budget. And for the public, this was the budget adjustments that were presented to the board in the prior hearing. Are there any additional questions or comments from the board members? Seeing none, may I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Gresham.
Second.
Second. Second by Mr. Holcomb. Please vote. The motion has been approved. Now, on to item 9.2, district calendar. Dr. Baca.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the governing board and executive team. Ms. Marshall will go over a proposed school calendars for the next 3 years to better align with our high school feeders as well as to better serve our. Ms. Marshall?
Thank you, President Osborne, members of the board, Dr. Baca, and executive team. On behalf of Principal Hillary O'Brien, who facilitated our committee, I'd like to present the recommendations from the calendar committee and from the survey. So the committee participants, you'll see that we had teachers, administrators, classified staff, as well as parents, so that we had that voice and representation. And you'll see from the timeline that there was opportunity in between the meetings for them to return to their stakeholders so that we had that input in between the meetings. So our objective, as Dr. Baca shared, revising the calendars, we have gone out for 3-year calendars but we are not in sync with Phoenix Union, which is our feeder proper high school district. And so this adopting 3 years would get us on that same rotation that Phoenix Union would be on. And then some of the needs that we had that came out of the negotiations and budget advisory was just the additional planning time that teachers felt that they needed. And it was just great to see through the committee that we really focused on the core values of the Madison strategic plan to help guide us. So the timeline that you'll see here was in the spring. And again, this came through some discussions through the IBN process. And so that's why the timeline started in the spring. And then continued through that survey that was sent out to the community and to staff. And so the breakdown that we have was overwhelmingly from both the parents and the staff to move the calendar. The option A was to keep the current calendar schedule, which is already board approved for the next 2 years. Option B was to take that existing calendar and make the following changes to it. We heard from parents and teachers alike that the TCT Wednesdays can be confusing. On the short weeks, if there's a 4-day week or a half day in the week, there has been no TCT, and the recommendation is to change it to all Wednesdays. The feedback from parents was that it was just easier to arrange daycare, knowing that it was every Wednesday than trying to coordinate which Wednesdays it would be. And again, through the negotiations, the teachers just feeling that added planning time would be very beneficial. This would move our fall break, the other recommendation, to align with Phoenix Union, which is now aligned to Glendale Union for those next 3 years for the fall break. Now, our recommendation for next year would be to keep ours as is, because we did get feedback from families as well as staff members that they have already made travel plans. So our fall break would remain that first week in October, but the following 2 years, it would be in alignment with both Phoenix Union and Glendale Union. We also felt as a calendar committee this would be okay because we had come to the board prior with the board approval of the other calendars that one break would be in alignment with Phoenix Union, one break would be in alignment with Glendale Union. So even next year, we'll still have one that's in alignment to help support parents, and then that following year, that would be the full alignment. And then the other thing was to change our end of the quarter, which are currently half days for students, to make those full release days for students to allow that additional planning time for teachers. We would have one exception, which would be the calendar for next school year, which is the 22-23 calendar. January 2nd or January 1st, which is a federal holiday but not a state holiday, because it falls on a Sunday, the federal holiday is observed on Monday, and so the recommendation would be that that would be a full planning day for next year's calendar, and then the following 2 years that it would be that Friday before the winter break that would become the full day. And then, of course, if we shift fall break, not next year, but those following 2 years, we would also shift the parent conferences accordingly. So those were the changes that came with option B. And you'll see that from the survey, we had, again, both the staff and the families who have overwhelmingly selected that option B, those changes that I just went over, be adopted. So these responses for the parents, I will say, we did weight those based on the enrollment of the schools, so that a school that had, so that the parent voice was heard regardless of what the enrollment at the school was. So those are weighted counts for our families. For our staff, the consideration, we did have more teachers that responded to the survey, about 2/3 of the teachers that responded, where our classified staff, we had about 20% that responded. But I do note that the classified staff, the hourly people, these changes wouldn't necessarily impact their 8-hour workday. And so the teachers were more impacted, and I think that was seen in the survey results where we had the majority of the teachers that were responding. So with that, we ask that the board adopt the new proposal, the option B, which would negate the next 2 years of calendars and then take these 3 years. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Questions? Ms. Gresham?
A couple quick questions. So for the fall break, so conferences would still be, before fall break. They're usually before fall break, right?
That is correct, but I believe we had shifted those, with the last calendar adoption to be after fall break. And again, that was based on the feedback from that previous survey from the committee and from the parent and staff surveys, that rather than trying to rush and get all that information prepared for families prior to the break, we had moved those to be after the break.
Okay. And then as far as, because usually that's the quarter, this break at the quarter, right? So
Correct.
would that affect when the timing is for that? We'll still have
It
the
would-
same?
The timing would still it would stay the same from what we just adopted for the last set of calendars, but you are correct that in previous years, the conferences were held before fall break. But again, the end of the quarter would happen at that same time. The teachers would have that planning day to finalize grades. Parents would have access through our parent portal of Power School to see those final grades, but it would allow the teachers that opportunity to better prepare for those parent
Okay,
conferences.
so that would all still work the same?
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Just real quick, on the survey, you mentioned that you had lower staff, or the classified staff.
Correct.
Do you know what the breakdown between A and B was on for the classified staff? And I
The
apologize.
classified staff, we had about 80% that voted for the option B, which is the changes, and about 20% that said to keep it
So
the same.
the classified staff also was very
Correct.
significantly in favor of that. And I think that's important. And on the families and that, about how many families responded on the survey? Or percentage?
We had, I believe it was 1,770 families that responded.
That's a good survey. That's a good sampling for a survey.
It's a good sampling. It's more than the end of the year survey. Unfortunately, we did not track the number of parents that responded to the last calendar survey. But what I do have in the notes was that parent survey came back about 50-50. But if you'll recall, that was that split with the fall break between Glendale Union and Phoenix Union. And so there was more of a split from our families in voting.
No, that gives me a lot more confidence. I had confidence before, but that really cements the confidence in the survey results. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Spear?
I have a motion. Are there,
Any other comments? All right, Ms. Spear?
I'll second the motion.
Well, let her make the motion.
okay. I'm trying to be official. I move that we approve the proposed school calendars as presented for school years 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25.
Now, Ms. Kazi.
I'd be happy to second that motion.
Spear makes a motion, and Ms. Kazi is second. Please vote. And in explaining my vote, I'm still concerned about the amount of TCT and limiting the classroom, given that we're finally synchronizing after 8 years with our 2 feeder districts. I will vote aye, but I'm still concerned, and I just want to raise that for the other board members' consideration. All right, with that, the motion passes. 9.3, the agenda item we've all been waiting for. Dr. Baca, do you want to explain this item?
Thank you, Dr. Osborne, members of the Governing Board, executive team. I present to you two options that were brought forth from a couple of our governing board members. As you know, the Arizona School Boards Association always asks for a political agenda and invites each governing board governing boards from districts throughout the state to submit those on behalf of the district. I know this will be a swift and quick discussion as the Phoenix Suns start to play at 7 o'clock. With that, I do believe Ms. Gresham, who is your representative, has an option, as does Mr. Holcomb.
So I'll let Ms. Gresham, you want to start the discussion, and then Mr. Is there something we need to put up so we can review? Or?
Yes, Ms. Humphrey's going to put up option 1, and that is the one that Ms. Gresham worked on and proposed. You're going to see similarities in them, but some differences as well.
All right, Ms. Gresham, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, so they are very similar. We don't really have any disagreements over this, and so that the public knows, ASBA, I'm happy with the way the ASBA agenda is as is, but they ask all the districts to submit their concerns. So, so I just went ahead and updated our one from last year. And we did, I suggest we take out the one about the online, because as we are not doing MVA next year, I figured we didn't need that. And then, just kind of cleaned it up a little, but I think that's all I have. So Mr. Holcomb can.
So maybe just let's do comments on maybe this one first, or do you want to hear from both and then I think mine's just kind of small refinement on item, the elimination regulations that overburden, criminalize, politicize. I think I would also, the district as well. And so what I'm thinking is things like if we're going to get more flexibility from Department of Health Services on after-school programs that would fit in that. So just a thought in terms of that item 5.
So Dr. Osborne, after politicize educators who care for students in school districts, is that what you want to add in school districts at the end?
I'm trying to think of. I would say I would at the end I would say let educators and districts educate, and then I'm trying to figure out a way to say it.
You could say criminalize and politicize educators and districts, school districts who care for students.
Yeah,
Okay.
something like that. I mean, I don't. And so, Mr. Other comments on Ms. Gresham's approach? Mr. Holcomb, do you want to describe yours?
Sure, and actually, Ms. Gresham, we modified it, put part of that in there, that criminalize and that. I wanted to put that in there because I wanted to put that out there. I think the words are important, and putting that out there, and I appreciate, I think, adding and districts, whichever option we go is fine. The reason I actually pushed to have the second option is not so much there was a disagreement, but I did want to have the discussion about the language, and again, focusing on the importance, I think, of the words, and also seeing that this is a direction not only to SBA, but things that hopefully can be used as a marketing tool for the position and try to educate the public and the legislators. The real difference, too, is in paragraph 5, number 5, where I put out, and there was the first option shortens that, which is fine. I'm a lawyer. I'm used to people wanting to shorten everything I say. To the extent they listen to it.
The bullet points kind of highlight your lawyerly.
Yeah, well,
There's no whereases, though.
No, I've got rid of whereases and comes now. Those are ancient. But I thought it was helpful to really emphasize there's more to this. Everything seemed to be simplified down to, well, what's in the classroom? You know, they focus on teachers, and teachers are important, but there's so much more than teachers. There's so much more than just what's in the classroom. And that's why I would be fine if we adopted option one, but I wanted to have the discussion about whether or not we should be really going and saying, look, there's all this other stuff that you have to consider that you're impacting because you don't recognize it. And that's the reason I had 5, and that's why I wanted to have the discussion.
So,
Thanks.
let me, before I go to Ms. Spear, Ms. Gresham, thoughts, comments? I mean, can we blend the two?
Yeah,
What's your thought?
we should, so if Mr. Holcomb wants to leave those in, which it's great, those are all great points, and we're only allowed to submit 5, I believe, on the form. So we would still need to get rid of, because he still has number 4 on there for the online education, so we could, we'll have to,
I would like to get rid of that one, too.
so we could combine these somehow.
Ms. Spear?
I would support option 2 as long as we got rid of number 4.
And if I could just suggest, again, I'm not going to, wade into this because I've done this so many years and I've left very frustrated with the process, but I will have some advice for you, Ms. Gresham, that we've asked, Dr. Osborne and myself have asked the SBA for many, many years. But I would refer to, education as an ecosystem, and it's a complete ecosystem, and I think people understand what that is, and as we use words that as opposed to, classified and certified, which means nothing to most people outside of this room. I think that helps when we really are careful about the language we use and wherever we use it.
Okay, so I'm getting a sense that is it option 2 with the modifications discussed?
If I may offer, Dr. Osborne?
Yes, and
If you go with option 2 to eliminate number 4 on option 2, so it's down to 5, and option 6 becomes number 6 becomes number 5, and that sentence would be modified to include in school districts as discussed under option 1.
okay.
And with that, the person only needs to say, I move option 2 with those modifications.
I would welcome a motion.
I will make the motion to adopt option 2 with those modifications.
Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
Ms. Gresham with the motion and Ms. Spear with the second. As Dr. Baca dreams of the pregame discussion.
It wasn't for that reason, it was just so we don't get stuck in the weeds with the language. So.
We all appreciate the,
And Mr. Chair, if I could just quickly explain my vote, I recommend that when you speak at ASBA, that you ask them once again to not just have a reactionary legislative agenda, but a proactive one. We've asked for this for years and years. Take 3 areas that you're going to write and run legislation, and then start working on it early. And I know we speak to, lots of times nobody's listening, but it doesn't hurt to continue to beat that drum.
So is that a request to speak at the?
That's a recommendation. They've heard from me enough.
yeah,
She's right there behind you.
I just remember the reaction as a practicing lobbyist when I got up and said, when you have 25 items, you will not pass any of these and you will fail miserably, so you need to cut it down to 5. And then they ushered Scott and then Scott got up and said the same thing, and then they went on and passed the 25 agenda. And so all my other clients pick 1 or 3 bills and they actually get passed. But what I know. All righty. Now on to item 10.
Before you on to item 2, we have to see whether or
I'm
not
sorry.
item point 3 passed. Has everyone voted? Who are you waiting for?
I did.
He voted yay.
All right, there we go.
There it is.
All right, in all the further, we have passed the agenda, the recommendations. All right, now on to item 10.1.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the governing board and executive team. Our next board meeting is on May 24th. Remember, it starts at 3 o'clock simply because we have our promotion ceremonies on that day, so it'll be 3 o'clock in this boardroom. We were going to have a proposed budget for you. However, the legislature has not passed one, and we were just informed that not to expect any of the forms until June. So that's why that one's in red, is because I'm going to be discussing a special board meeting we are going to need to have. But the major highlight of our May 24th meeting is the calling for a district additional assistance override in November of this year. January 14th, we start off with an executive session.
Just going back to that agenda item, the consent item on the risk retention,
Yes.
can you just make sure that when you brief us prior to that, if there's any significant changes in the policies?
Yes.
Just remember the COVID year, and I just have legal counsel or you guys review it for any
Ms.
other.
Garvey will properly prep me so I can prep you.
Okay. If there are no changes, that's fine, but
Okay. June 14th, executive session at 5 for my annual evaluation, followed by a regular board meeting. You're going to see we have a long consent agenda, but that's because the annual approvals and renewals of contracts and so forth. In terms of action items, it will be the proposed budget that you would adopt. It's not the adopted budget yet, but the proposed, as well as the pay for performance for me. I'm asking that you then have a special meeting on July 12th. That gives Ms. Garvey enough time between the proposed budget on June 14th. The holidays of July 4th is a busy time, and it falls just 2 weeks before your first regular meeting of the school year. So it would be a special meeting on July 12th at 6 p.m. Also, the last 2 weeks in June, this boardroom is not available since there's cleaning and stuff going on, and that's when the district, this section of the district office is scheduled for that. So we would ask just 2 items: the public meeting on the proposed budget, adopting the proposed budget as your adopted budget, and then possibly considering an adjacent ways levy because of Madison Park, rebuild and what may need to take place. We may not need that, but we'll know by then whether or not that is needed.
so, question on July 12th meeting, would that be a online meeting, or how would we?
That one, the boardroom will be available.
Oh, okay.
So 6 p.m., just it falls in line. If you want it a different time, if you want it virtual, however way you want it, that would be for you to discuss with Dr. Guerin.
Well, I do think it should be in person, since we potentially discussing a tax issue and a budget issue, so to the extent that, and given that my kids get to go on vacation this summer, but my wife and I do not, I'm happy to be here. No, just, but if that does hinder any other board members' plans, and if we can adjust it around, just, it does not for me. Does that work for other folks? Okay. All right, any other comments, questions on the calendar? All righty. Oh, Ms. Spear.
If we have that board meeting on, that special meeting on the 12th, are we expecting staff to come in for that as well, or not?
Ms. Spear, Mr. President, members of the board and
That's Dr.
executive
Guerin
team.
question?
The staff will be working anyway, and Ms. Garvey has indicated that she's not on vacation. Her vacation would have been finished over the summer for that time. Correct, Ms. Garvey? Yes.
I just want to be respectful of staff time.
I think we can have a skeleton crew.
Skeleton crew.
And usually for
bare
those special
minimum.
meetings, that's what you have. And that's even more reason why to have it in July as opposed to 2 weeks or the end of
Okay.
June.
We can pick up after ourselves.
And we will be crank calling you during the board meeting and.
Or I may be submitting a public comment.
Just, I wanted to make sure, when would we be so that is, when would we be adopting the statement in favor of the, we talked about that in July.
In
Would that be
June, on June 14th.
On June?
In the June meeting, you will be doing the pro statement.
So we approve it, potentially approve it next
So you
meeting, and then the following meeting.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. I misheard. I was thinking July. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All right, Ms. Spear and Ms. Gresham. I could table the motion till after the Suns game, but no, that would be cruel.
5 minutes.
The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Maggie.